Welcome to the Narrative Podcast. This is part 2 of my interview on Brandon.
Wow.
So we talked last week about how Brandon got his call to missions, how you started going to Kenya, India, China. We kind of talked about like some miracles that happened during that time, some ways that God used you and your team, how you got involved in missions.
Go back and listen if you haven't heard.
Yeah. You guys have to listen to it. Some really cool stuff. So now we're going to talk about, you were talking about you met this guy and he's Chinese and he said, hey, I want to invite you to go to China with me in 2 months.
Yes.
Continuous.
So I was like, no way. But when I left the venue, that church, I knew immediately I was going to China. I just knew it. I felt it like it was just peace. I was like, I'm going on this trip. Like there's a mission there. So I ended up calling him like 5 hours later and I was like, it was super fast.
Good fasting.
Yeah. Right. And I was like, hey, I just have a couple of questions about, the trip. And he was like, can you come over for dinner? And I was like, sure. So him and his wife invited me over for dinner and we ended up eating just, a very, very Chinese meal over his dinner table with his daughter, his wife. And it was just very like incredible. Yeah. And I remember just asking him a couple questions, like things that I had on my mind, thoughts that I had as far as things that I wanted to know in depth, like where are we going to be staying? Logistics. How much money do I need? Like this is super soon. Like what ministries are we going to be connected to? And he was like, well, I'm Chinese. I'm from China.
Got a couple of connections.
Yeah. So he was like, so a lot of our ministry is going to be ministering to brothers and sisters to encourage them. Yeah. But also it's going to be a lot of church ministry, underground church ministry. Great. And I was like, okay. And then he was like, and we can definitely get connected inside of like teaching English to kids and things like that. And I was like, okay, this is great. Yeah. I was like, okay, well, I'm in. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get the money for it. So he ends up telling me, I think the total was like $3,400, $3,500 because it was so close that plane tickets were very expensive. Yeah. And I was like, okay. I was like, I can definitely do this 100%. And I walked away and I called one friend and shout out to Richard Ellison. He is my biggest fan. Okay. And he is such a man of God that I love him so much. And I'm just so grateful to have him in my life. But I called him and I was like, dude, guess what happened in not even 10 hours? Yeah. And we start talking through it and I tell him all the details or whatever. And he was like, absolutely, you're going. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going. And he was like, yeah, you're definitely going. And he was like, how much is the trip? And it was like $3,400. It was like 34, 36. I honestly can't remember the exact price. And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, man, let's just pray. You know what I mean? Like it's going to get provided fast. Yeah. And I ended up getting off the phone with him and he immediately donated a huge amount of money. The moment we got off the phone and I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. I was like half funded.
That's a new partnering technique is to call people and be like, let's just pray.
Yeah. And so I was half funded. And by the time 5 minutes after we got off the phone and he ended up calling me like 2 days later and he asked me how it was going. And I was like, man, I'm actually about to record a video to post online. Yeah. Just like a little funny kind of sitcom video about needing funds to go.
Especially with your background with doing a little bit of theater with Kim, I bet it helped out a little bit.
Yeah. And I was low-key, this is a little plug I'll throw on there. I was low-key Vine famous.
Oh yeah.
So I have a lot of background in like just being like really over the top and goofy. So I decided to take it, to that level. Yeah. And I made a storyline video, which I wonder if I still have it, about me meeting Shrena Maria and how goofy it was. And it blew up. It literally blew up. To my standard, blew up. Okay. And
86 views.
And I think I ended up getting like $1,200 within like 8 or 9 hours because of it. So at that point I was like, I think I was a couple $100 off from being fully funded. And then the guy that I was renting a room from, I ended up telling him, I was like, man, I'm going on this trip, like all these things. And he gave me the rest of the money that night. So it was within 2 days I was fully funded.
Oh my gosh.
To go on this trip. And I knew God was fully in it. And I was like, man, I'm going. Like, this is happening. So I called Shren and he was like, let's buy plane tickets then, and we ended up doing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So what year is this?
2019.
This is 2019. What month?
This was
end of the year, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like October, I think at this time. Yeah. October. Yeah. October.
Okay. So you get on the plane. It's like 1,000,000 hours. I've been to Asia. Feels like it takes forever. Eventually you get bored and you just start
It's so
looking back and forth. Your butt hurts a little bit. Your legs are tired. You finally land in China. What happens?
So we land in China and immediately his buddy Tiger picks us up from the airport.
What a cool name.
Yeah. And that's the American name he chose. So when you're in China, when you're a kid, you get to pick your American name in elementary school. So either
that's like creating an email address in middle school. Yeah, like a really bad email address.
It's either like that or the teacher gets to pick it for you.
How solidified is that? Can you change that?
I don't know, actually. That's a really good question. I don't know. So I know like Shren, his American name is Gene. And then,
what a bad one.
But I would never do that to him. He is definitely a Gene, by the way. Shren, shout out if you're listening to this. You're definitely a Gene, American Gene. So it's really funny. But he's more of a Shren. Anyway, so Tiger picked us up from the airport. And he immediately looked at me and he said, he's big. And I laughed because in China, I didn't realize how big I was actually going to be. Like Shren told me like, you're going to tower over people. And I laughed, but no, for real. Like,
it's funny. He says it like there's something wrong with you.
Yes.
Like send it back.
Like I'm talking about nipple height. Like I think Maria was the tallest person in China, which is Shren's wife. And she was like up to like my chin. Yeah. So she is American and she was probably the second tallest besides me. And so, man, I remember I was like laughing whenever he said this and I was like, oh my gosh, I am huge here. Like I stand out so bad. And he was like, I don't think he's going to fit in my car. That's what he told Shren. Oh. So and I was like, it's fine. I'll just take a taxi or whatever. And he was like, no, we'll figure it out. So we waited there a little bit extra time. Somebody else came with another car that was able to drive that day. So in China, you only get to drive once a day or once a month because it's so busy. So like in Beijing, there's 23 million people. So you only get like 1 or 2 days a month to be able to drive on the road. That's why transport's always so busy. Like subways, buses, Ubers.
I've heard that. Maybe I'm mixing it up with Japan. There's the largest intersection in the world where like millions of people cross it every day. Maybe it's in Tokyo.
I think I'm thinking about Tokyo. Yeah. Or it might be.
But that's still insane. There's so many people.
Yeah. Yeah. There's 23 million people in Beijing alone. Yes.
Okay.
So it's very,
how
very
they regulate
busy.
That of like you can only drive on these days. Like how do they enforce that?
I don't know. I'm sure it's like a governmental thing. It's oh man, they can enforce anything that they want. Yes. Yeah. Yes. That's a whole other episode. So I ended up offering that up and Shren was like, no, we'll figure it out. So I ended up getting in the car. I was so smushed. And I remember like, okay, this is a good start to the trip. Like this is funny.
You're also kind of lucky that on the day you showed up was a day he can drive.
Yes. It was planned.
Okay.
So Shren planned that. Yeah, because he knew. He was coordinating with Tiger to make sure.
Schedule your days that you can drive? Or does the government tell you what days you can drive?
So the government pretty much tells you what days you can drive. Yeah. Wow. And then they go kind of from there. So we're driving, we get to the Airbnb and we're like, so satisfied with the Airbnb. It's like 1,000 times better than we thought. Like we had no idea what we were going into, but there was beds. The beds were on the floor, which is still incredible. They were great mattresses.
Yeah.
And but it was just incredible. Like everything was nice. Like there was a nice kitchen area. There was a nice, the rooms were really nice. There's a TV. We didn't know that, which is very American. We were like, we didn't know that in the pictures. There was no pictures for that. It just showed us like, hey, you have a bathroom and 3 bedrooms, so we just like, hey, whatever we can find that's decently priced.
Yeah.
So we get there, we're satisfied, and everything's going good. The next day we go to sleep. His mom travels from Changsha. The next day we wake up, she gets there and she's like, I want to take you to breakfast. I want to get you a bun. And I was like, okay, cool. Whatever. And I was like, that's a dream come true for me, because the first couple of times that I've been to China, it was a very different dynamic. So now I can actually be in China and get to know the people, the culture was the goal. So we were to be there for 3 weeks was the plan. And so we get a bun,
you keep plugging. It was the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got a bun. We're hanging out all day. Everything's going so good. The day ends. We wake back up the next day and she's like, I want to take you to a good Chinese hot pot today. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we end up doing our thing in the morning. They had a 1-year-old with them, Sherna Maria, by the way. So it was very challenging. Like, sometimes it was very challenging to get out of the house. You know how it is. Yeah. And so there'd be times where I'd go off like with just his mom and his brother, or just like one of his friends that he knew there. And they would kind of like take me to go do things or whatever. And when I say go do things, it would be like go minister to the area, share the gospel of the 3 circles with people, whatever, and translate for me. And so the next day, I'll just say, we're leaving the house and we're walking to the market, and we notice that there's like people with masks on. People are frantically like sprinting on the streets. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, is this some Cloverfield stuff? Like, I'm in China right now.
They're running from you because you're 6'5". That's what it is.
Right. There's smoke everywhere. It's so like, that's just not smoke. It's like pollution.
Yeah. Pollution's super bad in Asia.
Shren was like, oh, it's probably just the pollution. They have the masks, whatever. So we end up going to.
If you're listening, it's normal in Asia, in some countries in Asia, to just always wear a mask because the pollution's bad.
Yes.
So this is normal. Like, it's like a thing. And so I'm assuming for you, it was like, this probably isn't too out of the ordinary. They're wearing masks.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what Shren was saying. He was like, oh no, it's fine. He's like, it's the pollution. That's why they're wearing masks. So we started going to the market and we're heading there or whatever. And then Maria's mom calls, and it's like really late here in America. And, obviously it's like morning there, whatever. But she was like, have you guys heard? And Maria's like, no, what? And then she was like talking to her or whatever, and she gets off, and then we're like on the subway, and she was like, I guess there's been like this virus that has broke out, like this sickness.
Sounds like a movie.
That's broke out in Wuhan. I think it was Wuhan. I think it was. I can't remember, honestly. And I was like, I looked at Shren, I was like, how far is that from here? And he was like, by fast train, probably about 6 hours. It's pretty far, 8 hours, He was like, excuse me. He was like, but we should be good. We'll come to find out. People were dying left and right within minutes from us everywhere. Hospitals were filling up. People had this virus. They were just dying so fast in this area.
Wow.
And people, they ran out of masks within 2 days. They couldn't keep them up. There was like a back order. People are using sponges. People are using, t-shirts as masks, all these things. So then they put an order out. Here I am in Beijing 3 days later. Fourth day, they're like, everybody has to stay in their house, and we're going to let you know when you can go to the market. So everybody's got to take turns going to the market. So we're like, what in the world?
This is in October?
No, this is in December.
Okay.
Yep. Because remember, it was 2 months later. 2 months when I started planning to go was in October.
That's right.
I left 2 months later.
Left in December.
Yes. So I was like, what in the actual world is that? It was the very end of December, by the way. And I was like, okay, so this will probably pass, a couple days, whatever. 7 days goes by. We're stuck in the thing. We're able to go to the market every once in a while, walk to the market, all that. It's just very dangerous in the area. Yeah. So I told Shren, I lied. Shren told me, he said, we shouldn't be stuck here. He's like, we need to go and do ministry, and we need to encourage the Chinese people. And I was like, absolutely. I'm so down. And so we'd go to parks and we'd pray out loud and stuff, and we'd meet people and we'd pray for them. And then we would go to the hospital and pray, and, all of those things, and just do things that we could, subtle ministry things. But that was when Donald Trump, probably about 2 weeks in at this point, Donald Trump put a ruling out saying that if you're American and you're in a foreign country, being China, and you were there when this broke out, you're not able to come back until the earliest May of 2020.
So it's basically, I'm sorry, you're stuck.
Yeah. So I have like 5 days before I'm supposed to leave here. I have my flight booked and everything like that. And it just seems to get worse and worse in China. And I'm like, okay, this thing's not blowing over. Yeah. And United Airlines sends me, 2 days before I'm supposed to leave, sends me an email. It's like, your flight has been canceled until further notice. And we'll let you know when we open our flights back up. And I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So immediately I'm hearing from our president.
Hit you that you're not leaving? When you got that cancellation email?
So at this point, I was thinking about the president, who I'm supposed to trust, just told me that I'm not allowed to come back even if I wanted to.
Yeah.
The airline that was supposed to take me home is telling me that they don't have flights anymore. So then I immediately get on everybody else's. I take the refund, which is half refund, by the way. They didn't give me a full refund. They gave me a half refund.
Wow. Robbery.
Yes. So I immediately started seeing what I could do with that half refund, because at this point, man, I'm like living based off the money I raised, because I was also like very low in funds because I was a full-time missionary. I didn't have income like that. Like, I have a paycheck coming in. Yeah. Majority of the work that I did was volunteer and just finding money when I could. You know what I mean? So I was very low in funds. I got a couple bucks. I'm not lying. And I remember this refund came in and I was like, dang, man, I have to battle whether or not I get a ticket to go home or I eat. So I was like, you know what? I'll save like $10. $10 should get me like 4 days worth of food. Yeah. I get on there. I can't find a ticket less than $2,000 or $3,000 anyway on any other airline. And then all airlines shut down. That's when
they're hiking the prices because they knew people were trying to get home.
Yep. And then they shut down. And that's when it clicked for me.
When all the airlines shut down.
Yes. I was like, whoa.
You were on a deserted island.
So I sat there and I said, nope, there's a solution. So I immediately went to my room. I pulled out my journal and I started listing out everybody that I knew, every single person that I knew. Yeah. And I started making calls and asking people, would they be a monthly supporter? Because I'm not going to be able to get home until at least May. So I'm like, hey, give me 6 months of support, guaranteed of, $50 a month, please. Yeah. And I was getting people to support me. They were like, yeah, I'll give you, I give you 25, I give you 50, whatever. And the day before we're supposed to leave, Sharon and Maria get a call from her mom. I lied. That night, 2 days before the trip, that night, she gets a call from her mom. And she's like, I found 2 tickets to go back to get back to the States. And I told him, I was like, you 2 take those tickets. You have a 1-year-old. Sharon's like, but I'm Chinese. And I'm like, yeah, but your wife isn't. Yeah. That's like a whole nother world there. So I was like, you guys take the tickets. And he was like, okay. And they ended up taking the tickets. And I was sitting there like just all night, like, dang, man, I'm going to be here. So I asked him, I was like, who do you think that I can live with? All those things. And he was like, man, either Timothy or Paul. And I was like, okay, which are 2 of his brothers, by the way, 2 good guys, and not actual brothers, but friends. And I was like, cool, I could probably learn a lot from Paul. He speaks really good English. Like, he knows like Americanized stuff here. Maybe I can try to apply for a visa, but usually in China, you can apply for a visa in the country. You have to apply out and then
I wonder how forgiving China was at that time. If like you're stuck, I
applied for a visa and
I'd love to go home.
So I don't know. I don't know if they were, but I applied for a work visa, and they declined me. And the next day, the day before they're supposed to leave for their flight, they ended up getting Karen calls back, which is Maria's mom. And she's like, hey, we found 1 more ticket. And it's with, can't remember who the flyer was. I think it was like China Air or something like that. And then it goes into, but it's like the trip was start in Beijing, go to Shanghai, and then go to Montreal, and then Montreal to Boston, then all the way back to New York, and then go to North Carolina, and then Jacksonville. that's how inconvenient this flight was. But I was like, you know what, man, whatever I can do. I think it was like 60 hours of flight time with layovers. It was intense. And I was like, we can do this though, you know, whatever. And I ended up I said, okay, how much is it? And she was like, $2,000. And I was like, I have to stay here. I was like, I have like $400 to my name. Like there's no way. And she was like, okay. And then like 20 minutes later, they called and they're like, we're going to pay for the ticket. You need to get back. And I was like, no. I was like, guys. And they're like, yeah, we're going to pay for it. Yeah. And I was like, okay. So I had a flight booked, but it left a day after Srina Maria. So 2 days at that point, but a day after Srina Maria. So end up getting there, you know, to the airport. They did the swab thing. They did the whole, because they didn't really know what they were doing to leave the state or to leave the country. Yeah. And that's kind of when the whole story started for why I was actually in China. It was a prolong leading up to leaving. So God needed to extend the trip while I was there. But also there was a lot of ministry being done at that time. Yeah. But the overall cool idea of the China trip was the intimacy that I learned about with the Lord. Yeah. It changed the man of God that I was. Yeah. And God knew that I needed that amount of time. He knew I needed me to be at my most raw and vulnerable with literally nothing. Yeah. I had to solely rely on him in a third world country. So how long were you in China? Oh gosh, I don't remember the exact amount of time. Because you were talking about asking your partners until May. Yeah, because that was when our president was telling us that we couldn't come back. Right. March, and then the middle of March is when Trump announced that we could come back. So he was like, it's dying down. We're going to go through severe swabbing, pulling blood to make sure that you go through all the testing, all those things. Yeah. So you were stranded for like 3 months. Yeah. So what'd you do in that time? Just a lot of praying, dude. Like we did a lot of interacting. Like we still did ministry. And Paul and Timothy? No, me and Srina Maria. Because remember, Srina Maria were also there. That's right. They were still there. So they did Srina Maria when they could. We did a lot of like ministry stuff, and we would go to hospitals. We would pray on the streets. We would encourage people in the streets. Were you able to leave your home? Eventually. Not at first, not for a while. So you're stranded for a little bit of time, and then they said you can leave again. Yes. And then you could, get out, branch out, go on walks, because that's when that study came out. Like you could actually beat the virus if you are exercising. That's right. So then they opened up like, hey, we'll let people go out then on walks and stuff like that. Just stay 6 feet apart. That all started in China. 6 feet apart, mask on. Yeah. That whole thing. So you used it as an opportunity to get out and minister. Yes. To pray for people, pray out loud. Yeah. Meet the community. I wanted to meet the community. That's very strategic too. I mean, it's not like the government's going to come and arrest you for preaching the gospel. They've got bigger fish to fry. Yeah. And I wanted to meet the community. So I would go to basketball courts and play with brothers and sisters that were there, games, full games, tennis courts, all of that. We met some hip hop artists, some rappers, cool. That we had hot pot with, and we invited them over for dinner. And we had a huge hot pot table. I have videos of it. It's just incredible. Cool. They were rapping for us that night. Yeah. You showed me those. All that stuff. It was really good. We took advantage of, making sure people felt loved in a time that was very bad for their country. Yeah. That's what we took advantage of, is the Chinese people were going through a lot. Shrina told me that his entire life, he had never seen China so dead. Wow. Anywhere from people not on the streets. They couldn't celebrate the New Year holiday, the Chinese holiday, the way they wanted to. And that was very discouraging and depressing for them. And so I was like, man, well, like, let's do things to encourage people then, which is like, even if we're walking up to the night market. Ooh, I was just thinking about it. Chinese New Year's in February, isn't it? Yeah. So they couldn't do anything. Nothing. Wow. There was no parade. There was nothing. Because New Year wasn't affected at all for us. Yeah. Because it didn't. I worked in a restaurant during this time. Nothing. We didn't shut down until like the first or second week of March. Yeah. No, the
We
end of
knew
March.
about it in like
y'all
January.
Y'all knew it was coming to the States. It hit New York the second week of March.
It blew out New York.
Yeah, it blew out New York the second week of March. Then it hit Boston really hard. It hit all of the main places that people were traveling into.
Yeah.
Is when it really, hit hard. But I remember there's a long story about the whole mission and idea. It's not really a long story. I could probably get through it pretty fast, but
do it.
I get on the airline leaving Beijing, and I'm not flustered. I'm super at peace. And I get to my seat, and I look around. And I notice I'm like only like number 6 on the flight, and we had like 10 minutes before we were leaving. And I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be a very small flight. Mm-hmm. And I put my bag up in, the overhead, and then I go to sit down on my seat. And as soon as I sit down, I hear the name Larry pop up in my head. Okay. And I laughed. And I was like, Larry, and I'm looking around and I'm like, Lord, if that was you, I just want to let you know there's not going to be any Larrys on this plane. These are all Chinese people.
Yeah, they're all named Tiger.
Yeah, and so I just kind of chuckled. And then I ended up folding up the arms and I fell asleep in the flight from Beijing to Changsha. I think it was like 8 hours or something like that. We did a layover, and then we left Shanghai. I said Changsha. I meant Shanghai. We left Shanghai.
Thailand. No, not Thailand.
That's China.
China. Sorry.
Shanghai.
I was thinking of Chiang Mai.
Oh, yeah. Very close.
And also Chiang Rai. Both of those are in Thailand.
Yeah. And we flew to Montreal. And that flight, I want to say it was like right around 12 hours.
Yeah, it takes approximately forever.
Yeah. And I fell asleep and I slept the whole time. They didn't even wake me up for food. So I just like slept the whole time, which is really rare for me, dude, because I don't sleep longer than like maybe a few hours. And we get there, man, we land in Montreal, and I remember just feeling like really weird. And I just like got up and I was feeling groggy. I wasn't feeling sick. I was feeling like spiritually weird. I was like, man, this is not going to be a good interaction in Montreal.
Some people call that discernment.
Yeah. And I was like, it's just weird. So I grab my bag, I get up, I go to the front, and then I get off the plane and I go to the baggage claims. I grab my bag and I get to, the customs. You got to go through the whole thing. And they end up asking me, passport, boarding ticket, all those things. And I hand it to them. And she was like, have you been in China in the last 14 days? And I was like, everything inside of me wanted to lie.
Yeah.
I wanted to say no, but there was like this strong conviction in me, dude. Like I literally couldn't verbally say no.
Yeah.
So I was like, yes. I was like, I actually just flew in. She's like, okay, come with me. So she ends up taking me. She brings me back to like the security room, and they end up doing testing, and then they make me change into like a jumpsuit thing. They're like, oh. Yeah.
Like a hazmat suit?
Yeah, like something like that. It was like an orange one. It was really weird. And I was like, hey, before you take all my things, can I just have 2 things? I grabbed my Bible and a pen because I was like, I don't know how long I'm going to be here.
Yeah.
So they ended up leaving there for almost 2 days. No food, no bathroom, nothing. Holding my junk for almost 2 days.
Wow.
It was so intense.
In the airport?
Yes, in the Montreal airport.
They had no idea what to do, so they just quarantined you right there in the airport.
Yeah, quarantined me, and then they took blood and they nose swabbed me, and they came back and she knocked on the door and she's like, here's your stuff. She's like, you passed your tests, all these things. And I was like, okay. So I was like, can you guys do that legally? Like, that's not even normal, dude. You know what I mean? And I just feel like you guys can't do that.
Yeah.
Because you're pretty much anyway, it's just breaking so many laws, I feel like, even for their country.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm going to go ahead and pause you because I want to keep hearing about this, but we're going to go into an episode 3 because there's more stuff I want to hear. And there's more that you have to talk about because you also just got back from Rwanda a couple of days ago.
Yes.
So I'm going to pause you. Where we left off, you were stuck in Montreal.
Yes.
In Canada. So stay tuned for next week. We're going to talk more about it.